Hi folks! This is a brief video lecture on one new aspect of the Mbira song, Nema Musasa. Remember, we already studied this song in class last week. We talked about this music's rhythmic structure and its melodic texture. Today we're going to talk about one more musical element of this song, its melody. But before we move on to that, let's do a quick review. I want you to take out a piece of blank paper. Please make sure it's in decent condition because you'll be writing a number of things on this paper throughout this video, and you'll be turning it in at our next class meeting. Please pause this video if you need a moment to take out a sheet of paper and press play when you're ready. Okay, so now that you have your sheet of paper, please write your name and then write the two terms that we learned in class to talk about rhythm and texture in Mbira music and define these terms. Remember, there are two specific terms that we learned, one to talk about the rhythm and one to talk about the musical texture of this music. Please pause the video and write down these two terms and give a brief definition, and then play the video when you've finished doing this. Great, so now that you've reviewed these two musical elements, we're going to add a third one. Today we're going to talk about the melody, using Nema Musasa, the same song that we studied in class, to talk about the general melodic structure of Mbira music. First, we need to make sure we know what melody is. If you remember, we learned about this in our second week of class when we did our musical elements Jeopardy game. Melody, as we learned in that class, is a succession of musical tones that has an identifiable shape and meaning. Now the word shape is in red here because in a moment we're going to be looking a little more closely at what exactly that means. First though, let's think through some examples of melodies that are mostly familiar to us. So as we know, there are many different kinds of melodies. For example, there are melodies in kids songs like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. That's the melody of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. There are also melodies in Western art music, like the main melody from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Bum 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 ba-dum. That's part of the melody of that. And there's melodies in many other types of games in video game music, like Super Mario Brothers theme, which happens to be a favorite of mine. There's also melodies in movie music, like the Star Wars theme, which happens to be a personal favorite of my husband's. And there's melodies in old rock songs, like the Beatles' All You Need Is Love. Basically, you need to know that melodies are everywhere in many different kinds of music. So as you know, I'm a dork, so I picked some pretty dorky songs and pieces to demonstrate melody. But I want you to think for a second, what other songs have melodies? Melody is just about everywhere. I want you to pause this video again and please think of a song or a piece that you know very, very well that has a melody. Remember our quick and dirty test to tell if a song has a melody or not. If you can easily hum along, what you're humming is probably the melody. If you can't easily hum along, for example, if the song is played entirely on drums or if it's all spoken word, there probably isn't a melody in that song. If you're not sure if the song you're thinking of has a melody, choose something else where the melody is more obvious. The point is to choose a melody that you know extremely well, not to choose one that's tricky. When you've thought of a song, write down its name and then resume this video. Okay, great. So we know that melody is a succession of musical tones that has an identifiable shape and meaning, and we thought of a few sample melodies. Now remember a minute ago, before all that terrible singing of mine, when I said we were going to talk about what it means to say that a melody has shape. So what does that mean? The shape of a melody refers to the structure of the melody, and rather than trying to define this, it gets very strange. So we are going to just look at a couple examples. Let me pull up my handy dandy whiteboard here. All right, great. Okay, 1 second to get this ready. Here we go. So I'm going to hum our first musical example, that was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to draw on this whiteboard how low or high the pitches are. So a high pitch might go a little closer to the top and a lower pitch might go a little further down on the bottom. Here we go. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Okay, so this is a very rough drawing of what the melody of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star might look like. If you had to say this was a shape, what shape would you say? It's not a square, it's not a triangle. What is it? It kind of just looks like a weird line, right? So since it's a line, we would call the melody of Twinkle a linear melody, because when you draw the melody like this, it turns out to be a line. So what else does it mean to have a linear melody? Well, just like a line, a linear melody has a clear beginning and a clear end. So we know that the beginning of Twinkle starts here. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. And then it goes all the way through to the end. How I wonder what you are. And that's the end. So the structure of this melody is linear because it has a clear beginning and a clear end. So let's see if another one of our examples has a linear melody. Let's do Beethoven's Ninth because I like that one. Here we go. Bum 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 ba-dum. What do you think? It's still a line, right? And it still has a clear beginning and a clear end. So this melody is also linear. All right, let's pick one more example. How about Super Mario Brothers? I love that one. Ba-dum bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So that line looks pretty weird, right? But it's still definitely a line. It still has a beginning over here and an end over here. So I think you get the point. Most Western art music is actually linear melody. This is something that most, though not all, Western music actually in general has in common, not just art music, also pop songs, video game songs, as you can see. So now we know what a linear melody sounds like. When we're talking about a linear melody, we might also refer to it as the melodic line. So remember that song I asked you to write down the name of just a few minutes ago? Now I'd like you to pause this video again, and I want you to draw on your paper the melodic line of that song. It doesn't have to be exact or perfect, just draw a general estimate of the melodic line like I did. You don't have to draw the whole song, just pick part of one verse or part of a chorus. I suggest picking the part of your song you want to draw first and then thinking through it a couple times and noticing which pitches are lower and which are higher. Then slowly hum or sing this part of the melody in real life or in your head, and while you're doing that, slowly draw a line that matches the shape of the melody towards the bottom of the paper for low pitches and towards the top of the paper for high pitches. Go ahead and pause this video and do this, and then resume the video when you've done. Great. So now that we know what a melodic line is, we're going to talk about the melody of Mbira music. Let's listen to the very beginning of Nema Musasa, and let's listen for the melody we talked about in class, which goes like bum 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 bum. Remember, that's the melody we said that we heard in this example in class, although there's many melodies here. Let's focus on that one for a second. Let's listen and see if we can hear it. All right, I'll stop it there. Did you hear that melody? Now I want you to think, does that melody sound linear to you? Remember, we said a linear melody must have a clear beginning and a clear end. Does the melody of Nema Musasa sound like it has a clear beginning or end? Not really, right? Maybe, but it kind of also just keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. Do lines keep going over and over and over again? They don't, but what shape does? What shape goes over and over and over again and has no beginning or end? Take a guess. Any thoughts? Surprise! If you guessed circle, you are right. Nema Musasa does not have a linear melody, rather it has a cyclic melody. The Shona people hear this melody as a circle. It has no set beginning or end, and it keeps repeating infinitely. This is very important. A circle has no beginning or end, and it keeps repeating. Mbira melodies repeat over and over and over and over again throughout a song many, many times. Mbira melodies also have no beginning or end. This can be a little weird to think about, so there's a great website that I have here that demonstrates this last point really well. Let me show you. Here we go. Okay. The text on this website gets a little more technical, so just ignore the text for now. Let's look, though, at the circle. This is what I want you to be looking at. It looks very different from our melodic lines, right? So this is a representation of the melody of Nema Musasa. Now keep in mind, the circle does not show if pitches are high or low like our melodic lines did. Instead, it shows how Mbira melodies repeat over and over and over and don't have a clear starting or ending point. There's no obvious start or end in the circle that I can point to. Each of the little lines sticking out of the circle represent one pitch, and the circle itself represents the pattern of the melody, which keeps repeating over and over. Now remember, the melody we were listening for in Nema Musasa is only one melody. There are many going on at the same time. So here's a very slowed down version of one full melodic cycle of Nema Musasa. Please listen. All right, that actually didn't play the whole cycle, which I'm not sure why. This website must be having trouble for a moment, but in any case, you get the idea. There's one full cycle in Nema Musasa, and then it repeats over and over and over again. Now, this website gets a little more technical in here, but what I like to show you is that it also shows how you can start here at the very top of the circle, but you can also start over here on the right. You can also start over here. You can really start the circle anywhere, and in Mbira playing practice, players really, in theory, can start anywhere in the melodic cycle that they would like. Now, in reality, in practice, there's a couple common starting places. You can see there are at least two common places for starting Nema Musasa. There's here, and then there's one that's slightly off-center from that as well. So now, let's go back, and we're going to listen to Nema Musasa one more time. And I want you to listen for that cyclic melody. So we're going to play just one full cycle from our recording, and then I'll stop at the end so you'll know that that was one full cycle of the melody. All right, here we go. That's it. That was one cycle. Did you kind of hear it? It can be a little tricky to hear, but if you've been paying attention, hopefully you heard that cycle. Just to make sure, let's listen one more time, and I want you to count the number of full melodic cycles that you hear and write down that number on your paper. Here we go. Please count the full cycle number that you hear. Oh, here we go. Okay, so you should have heard that cycle more than one time. Please write down how many times you heard it on your paper. So to review, we now know that music for Mbira Zawadzimu is not linear, like most Western music, but rather is cyclic. And that means that the melody repeats many, many times throughout the song, and there's no clear beginning or end. Okay, so now it's your turn. For our next class meeting, I want you to think of a song or a piece that you know of that seems like it might have one or two cyclic elements to it. If you know of a song that has a cyclic melody just like Nema Musasa, that's great, you can choose that. But if not, and it's more likely that you won't because not many songs that we're familiar with in the West have exactly cyclic melodies like this. Instead, like I said earlier, they tend to be linear. So I want you to think of a song in which the melody seems to repeat over and over and over again, or a song in which the beginning isn't very clear or where the ending isn't very clear. This might take you a couple minutes, and that's okay. Feel free to do some hunting around on YouTube or on your music player of choice. Then when you've found a song that has a melody that you think has at least one cyclic element, write down on your paper its name and what seems cyclic about it to you. For example, does it repeat many times? Once you've done that, please locate an online recording of this song or piece. YouTube and Spotify are good places to start, but feel free to look elsewhere if you need to. Then please post a link to this recording on Blackboard before 6 p.m. the night before our next class meeting. Please bring the paper you wrote on during this video with you to class. I will collect these papers as soon as class begins. These papers will count towards your attendance, so make sure you bring them with you or you will be marked as absent. Then we will watch a few of the videos that you posted to Blackboard in class and we'll discuss the cyclic elements of their melodies. I've also posted this assignment to Blackboard in case you need it. Enjoy and see you next week.